Hi, this is a quick video to tell you a bit more about how we approached Planetary Blues, just because it's often easier to demonstrate certain things at the keyboard than it is to try and explain them on the page. So to recap, as with our other songs, Nick had already written the lyrics, he'd written the vocal line and some chords to go underneath it. And so it was my job to think about how to rework those, how to arrange them, and how to come up with something that would be fitting for this cosmic conversation. As I said in the post, I'm not a blues pianist. Blues piano is an amazing specialist skill that I don't have. I really wish I did have it. And so in this instance, it felt a bit more comfortable for me to look to my classical background and maybe think about classical pieces that deal with the universal and the existential for a bit of inspiration when it came to Planetary Blues. Thinking about that kind of classical piece, the first that came to mind was Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which has been described as a hymn to humanity. And if you think you don't know it, you probably know at least a bit of it. That's Ode to Joy from the final movement. But the part I was thinking about was the opening, which is really interesting, and it has been described as being like the birth of sound itself. You have the strings creeping in out of the silence on these notes, an A and an E, and you have this falling figure also on an A and an E. And so what comes across quite strongly is this interval of a fifth here. A little bit later a D comes in as well, and you have another different fifth from D to A, and you have your A to E. And these fifths are really interesting. They sound a little bit like an orchestra tuning up for a start in this opening, which feels very ambiguous in lots of ways. You're not quite sure where it's going to go. And this fifth, it has this feeling of space, this feeling of openness, compared with, say, a minor third or a major third. The fifth has this openness about it, which felt very appropriate for our Planetary Blues, and so that's why I wanted to use some of those elements in the introduction to Planetary Blues. That's why I leaned in to that idea of an orchestra tuning up, and I added a little bit of audience chatter in there as well, and really sticking with these big open fifths. Actually, thinking of the minor and the major there has reminded me of another classical piece which includes a big fifth in it and also deals with the existential. Again, one you'll probably know. That's Thus Spake Zarathustra by Strauss. You might know it as the theme from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Again, you get this fifth there and the octave to create this feeling of the epic. It's very spacious and open. Anyway, so after the introduction of Planetary Blues, I thought about the rest of the accompaniment, and I wanted to keep playing around with these fifths, and so I stacked them on top of one another and adding in the third to establish that we're in the key of D major here. We get what is essentially a ninth chord, and I wanted to use this around the accompaniment. This was the shape that I essentially wanted to build the accompaniment out of. And so I played around with this a little bit, mainly following the chords that Nick had already established. And when I got to this chord, you hear it has this feeling of it, you want it to resolve. You have those notes crunched up against one another, creating this little bit of tension that you want to be released. And that in itself reminded me of another classical piece. It reminded me of Debussy's Clair de Lune. it reminded me of this particular moment. You have that same, that really beautiful chord where you just want that tension to be resolved. And so, given that Clair de Lune means moonlight, given that we're thinking about the cosmos, I thought this might be another nice little thing to drop into Planetary Blues. And so, if you're listening to the accompaniment, you might just hear that. Which is very much a nod to the Debussy there. Then one other thing I wanted to do was introduce some blue notes, notes that you hear often in blues and jazz. They're notes that you add to a scale to add expression, to create feeling. To give you an example, instead of playing, I might play, I might sweep up to that note. Actually, if I was singing this, or I probably would slide from one note to the other, or even go somewhere in between. But obviously you can't do that on a piano, so which is why you hear quite a lot of that kind of thing. Or instead of, you might get, that's a figure you hear quite a lot in blues. And so I wanted to use these in the accompaniment. So in the key of D, I was looking at and so joining them together, you get the figure that you hear at the very end of the song. And it's funny, when you play this, it has a strange circular kind of feeling in the fingers. It's almost like you could keep on going round and round forever. It has this strange infinite feel to it, which I thought was quite appropriate again for our song. So that's why we end the song with that little nod to the blues tradition. So that's about it, and do have a listen out for those things. I hope you can spot them, especially those fifths. You'll even hear them up high in the accompaniment, just decorating, almost like little stars, but using that fifth shape again for that sense of space. Yeah, listen out, and do get in touch with us. Do leave us a comment, let us know what you think of the songs. It's always really lovely to hear from people. So thank you for listening so far. I hope you spot some of those little musical things in there, and happy listening.